There's a new draft rumor that implies that Cam Boozer might go higher, perhaps to the Jazz at number 2. Let's look at the rumor, let's dissect it and what it might mean, including some possible trades in the draft. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Okay, so from a site called 48 Minutes, and if you want to get the link, go to slcdunk.com. I wrote about it there before I talk here. You can go to that. They have some intel. Now, I don't know this source. I asked around with some of my friends and so on. There's no reason not to believe this group. I don't think there's a huge reason to also believe them. So a little bit of grain of salt. But what they are reporting kind of matches up with a lot of the different reporting going on and some of the things I've honestly heard myself. The first thing that they say, now I'm going to explain everything that they said and kind of dive into a little bit. And I believe this implies potential trades might be coming, actually. So, according to 48 Minutes, Cam Boozer may be higher on boards than people expect. We know that A.J. DeBonsa and Darren Peterson have more or less become the consensus top 2. We're now hearing from this blog that Cam Boozer might be higher. They say some NBA teams are seeing little gap between A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, and Caleb Wilson, which form a clear top 4. Jeremy Woo of ESPN.com writes that rival teams don't see DeBonsa as a lock to go number 1, and Woo writes that all 4 are expected to receive consideration by the Wizards. Now, 48 Minutes says, our intel tells a slightly different story. While the Wizards have done extensive research on all the top prospects, sources connected to ownership expect DeBonsa to be the selection with the number 1 pick. Washington is always evaluating trade offers, though the franchise is likely to keep the pick. So, it's very clear from multiple reports, multiple consensus reports from different reputable reporters that A.J. DeBonsa is very likely to be the number 1 pick. And it's not a bad choice by the Wizards. DeBonsa is an absolute number 1 worthy prospect. He's incredible. And most of that reporting that has had A.J. DeBonsa go to the Wizards, all of that tends to follow with the Utah Jazz being fine with that and taking Darren Peterson number 2. Well, this from 48 Minutes is interesting. It says, our intel suggests that Boozer is strongly in the mix for the number 2 pick. The recent clip of new Mavs GM Mike Schmitz explaining how athleticism is no longer seen as something that dictated upside, but rather is a mindset that several evaluators around the league align with. Positional size, skill, and feel for the game are the metrics that determine greatness or upside, Schmidt explains. It's easy to understand why Boozer could be the preference of many teams over Wilson, for example. So, that's not exactly saying Utah has Boozer at number 2 over Peterson. It's just that the Jazz are strongly considering Boozer at the number 2. Now, why does that matter? Well, from lots of things we've heard and seen, the Grizzlies are very high on Cam Boozer. They think he fits really well with Edey, could be the cornerstone player that they are looking for. They may have Cam Boozer number 1 on their board. So, if the Utah Jazz know that Cam Boozer is the pick that the Grizzlies want, they could potentially make a trade for Cam Boozer, moving him to the top 2, which kind of aligns with this idea that he might be higher on boards and could potentially go number 2. Utah could potentially trade with the Grizzlies, move back, take Darren Peterson, the guy they want anyway, at number 3. If they're able to convince the Grizzlies that there's a chance that their guy, like what if the Grizzlies have Cam Boozer number 1 overall on their board over DeBonsa or Peterson? They might be willing to make that trade. Now, what makes this interesting and what makes this draft fascinating is that's not the only trade possibility here. There's a scenario where the Wizards have A.J. DeBonsa as their clear-cut number 1. The Utah Jazz have Darren Peterson as their clear-cut number 1. And the Memphis Grizzlies have Cam Boozer as their clear-cut number 1. What's crazy about this draft is that is not out of the question. Though all 3 of those players, you could argue, are worthy of the number 1 pick for various reasons. And maybe in another video, we'll talk about that. If that's the case, if the Wizards know that the Jazz have Darren Peterson at number 2, and they know that if A.J. DeBonsa and Darren Peterson, if those 2 are on the board at number 2, and they know that Utah's taking Darren Peterson, then that opens the possibility of a 1-3 trade. Maybe the Grizzlies, if they're worried about Utah for whatever reason, they jump to number 1 to get Cam Boozer. Like, let's say Utah has A.J. DeBonsa number 3, and they know that, but they're not completely sure. They might be willing to trade up to number 1 with the Wizards, and they get their guy at 1. Utah gets theirs at number 2. And then the Wizards get A.J. DeBonsa, who they would have picked at number 1, at number 3. It's almost the inverse of what happened with Danny Ainge when he traded back from 1 to 3 for Tatum and left the Lakers at number 2. In this scenario, he'd be the Lakers at number 2, just taking Darren Peterson, who they want. I thought this was an interesting rumor. Now, I don't know if this is completely accurate, although it makes sense to me. I mean, of course, both the Wizards and the Jazz are telling people that everyone is in consideration. It would be not smart to just show your hand. But at times that does happen. And we're going to see this offseason. And we haven't seen it in the past with the Angels very much. They don't announce their workouts. We'll see who comes to the Jazz for a workout. My guess is AJ, Peterson, and Boozer, and Caleb Wilson will likely come to Utah for a workout. It's the right thing to do. All 3 and all 4 of these teams should be having these guys for a workout, right? I don't know if AJ and Darren are all either going to go to Chicago at 4. Maybe. It's possible. They might not want to. I know some of these players don't want to work out for certain teams too low because they don't want to let people think that they're okay being drafted low. They want to be drafted as high as they can. But anyways, these are smoke screens that we're going to continue to see. We'll cover each of these as they come. I thought this one was interesting because I do think it implies potential movement. If Utah can somehow get a trade with the Grizzlies, get some sort of asset, and get the player they want, that would be incredible. And Danny Ainge, he's been willing to do that in the past, so that's something he would not mind doing again. If you can get assets and the player you want, you do that every time. All right, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to all the All-Stars. I appreciate you guys immensely, and all the members. I will talk to you next time.